Thiessen, American Enterprise Institute scholar and Fox News contributor, and Ed Rendell, former DNC chairman and Pennsylvania governor. Great to have both of you with us this evening.
Good to be with you, Marc.
Governor Rendell, let me start with you on this. Thank you. Let me start with you on this, Governor Rendell. What do you think Joe Biden should do? Because it sounds like he's a little bit on the fence here.
Well, I'm a strong supporter of the repeal of the Hyde Amendment. That was part of our platform in 2016, and I voted to support our platform. I think anytime you have a constitutional right guaranteed by the Supreme Court, it shouldn't be denied people because they can't afford it. I think the vice president should take a re-look at this because as the Planned Parenthood clinics are being closed in many southern and western states, then poor women have absolutely no access towards abortion. And I think that's their right under the Constitution. And I think in light of that, I hope the vice president does reassess his position. But I'm for Joe Biden, regardless of whether I disagree with him on this issue, because I don't think there's one out of the 25 candidates who I agree with on every single issue. I think Joe Biden's a good man. I think he'll be a great president. I hope he rethinks this.
So, Marc, what do you think? You know, politically, it's interesting when politicians leave the door open on an issue like this. And he said quite clearly back in 2012 in the soundbite that we showed before the break, that it didn't line up with his faith and that he doesn't believe that federal funds essentially should be used for abortion. But now he says he would consider being in favor of that repeal. What do you think is the wiser move for him as a candidate?
Well, I actually think this controversy is great for Joe Biden because it's kind of his Sister Souljah moment. We now know that with the exception of Joe Biden, every Democrat running for president supports taxpayer-funded abortion on demand up until the moment of birth. That is an extraordinary statement, an extraordinary position, because the fact is the majority of Americans do not support taxpayer-funded abortion on demand up until the moment of birth. So Joe Biden is aligning himself with the majority of Americans and even the majority of Democrats. There are only 29% of Americans who support taxpayer funding and only 13% that support abortion on demand. So the fact is most Americans look at abortion as to some extent a necessary evil rather than celebrating it, and they draw a line somewhere. They don't want to completely eliminate it, but they want to put reasonable restrictions on it. And the line Joe Biden has drawn, which is reasonable to most Americans, is that he doesn't want to pay for it. He actually takes seriously a statement that a lot of people throw out there and don't really mean it, that I personally oppose abortion. He says, if I personally oppose abortion, I shouldn't be forced to pay for it. And I think most Americans and most Democrats will see that as reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, Ed, it just raises aside from the moral issues here, it raises that interesting political question. When you look at the polling in America, it appears that the majority of Americans are not where so many of these candidates are on this issue. So does it strengthen Joe Biden's hand here to say, no, actually, I'm on the side of 51% of Americans?
Well, I think when Planned Parenthood was available in every state and had access to abortion for women who wanted it, and it's their constitutional right under the Constitution, and this court hasn't changed that. I think most Americans realize that those constitutional rights shouldn't be given based on your ability to pay. So I think it's changing, and the circumstances are changing. And a good elected official always has a viewpoint, but that viewpoint can be changed by circumstances. So I would urge him to look at the circumstances. In one state, there's absolutely no Planned Parenthood clinics anymore. So what's a poor woman to do if she wants to exercise her constitutional right?
Well, Marc, what do you say about that?
Well, what I say is that this is going to actually help Joe Biden with winning over working class voters in that, which is what the Democratic Party actually has to do. Because again, the American people don't look at it as first of all, the Supreme Court hasn't said that it is a constitutional right, abortion on demand, taxpayer funded up until the moment of birth. The Supreme Court has said that you can have reasonable restrictions on abortion. You're wrong. No, the Supreme Court has said that you can have reasonable restrictions on abortion. And so Joe Biden is proposing a reasonable restriction on abortion, which has had bipartisan support since Roe v. Wade. And you've got his job as running for president is to try to win back those Obama-Biden voters in your state, in states like Ohio and Michigan, the industrial Midwest, that defected to Donald Trump. And those people are pretty socially conservative. They don't support abortion on demand, taxpayer funded up until the moment of birth. So I think the Democratic Party is putting itself in a bad position by taking such an extremist position on abortion. And Joe Biden is dialing that back just a little bit. And it's like it's a controversy that he's going to be excommunicated for it. I think that just shows the extremism of the Democratic Party when it comes to abortion.
Yeah, and Ed,
No,
we're
I
going to see this play out
absolutely
quite
disagree with that.
clearly, I'm sure. Go ahead.
No, I disagree with that. Look, most Democrats take the position I take. Even if we disagree with Joe on this one issue, that doesn't mean we're going to be against him because, again, I don't think there's one of those 25 candidates that I would check the box on every issue with. And I think that's a reasonable approach. I think Joe Biden would make a great president. He and I may disagree on this issue, but I'm still for him, and I'm still for him, and the vast majority of Democrats are still for him right now.
Yeah, Marc, it's easy to imagine how this plays out on the debate stage. And before it comes to that moment, the former vice president is going to have to decide where he is on this topic, whether or not he wants to put the stake in the ground that, as a purely political perspective, you would encourage him to do, or whether or not he's going to stand up there and say, you know what, I've thought about it. Let's take a look at what he said on May 4th in this campaign. Watch this.
Will you commit to abolishing the Hyde Amendment, which hurts poor women and
yes.
women of color?
Yes. Right now, it has to be. It can't stay.
I mean, you can see the discomfort playing out in that moment.
Yeah, he said that he misunderstood the question. He thought that she was asking about Mexico City and has subsequently said that he stands by his position on the Hyde Amendment. Look, the Democratic construction for Catholics like Joe Biden, who really should be, any Catholic by their faith should be completely pro-life. But his position is that I personally oppose it. But I'm not for imposing my views. He actually believes that, whereas most people use that as a fig leaf. And so good for him for at least coming that far.
Gentlemen, thank you. Governor Rendell, Marc Thiessen, great to see you both tonight. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks.
Coming up right